Professor, what have you got me into? It looks like a mutant village.
Detroit knows all the passages that lead to his base, so he's left some of his evil dummies to stop you.
Now you tell me.
Hey, Sid, look! I've managed to hack into Detroit's surveillance system and grab some pictures of my poor daughter. She's being held by one of Detroit's junk bots.
Hey, you, watch what you're doing. I can still see the dust from over here. Do your job properly.
Wow, I'd never seen her before. She really is beautiful, but she looks like a crash test dummy. Professor?
What? I can't hear you. The signal is going. Talk to you later.
That's strange. I could have sworn.
So perhaps all is not as it first seems in the world of Sid the Dummy, but we are now at World 3, the Swamp/Temple world. Our first enemy is these flowers, and they cannot be defeated by any means, not even the fire bazooka, so we just need to jump over them. We should jump a bit before we reach them. Because of the odd jump arc, it's just usually best to jump before we even move the control stick when we're trying to evade these things. The runoff of sewage also appears to hurt us, which is rather odd because we were just in the sewers. Or perhaps that's something entirely different, in an entirely different underground area, even though this would appear to be where the sewer connects with the Swamp Temple. Maybe that's not what they were going for? But if they were going for that, then I want to compliment that. I like at the start of each new world how there are remnants of the previous world left over. This secret area unfortunately does not have an extra life force, but I believe we will get at least 3 extra lives in this world, if not 4. So while we're walking around not really doing much except jumping over plants, I feel I should mention that Sid the Dummy was almost released on the Zeebo. Now for a while I thought it was released on the Zeebo, but it turned out it wasn't. I have no idea how difficult it is to port something to the Zeebo, but I know the Zeebo uses apparently some cell phone hardware, which is why it played a lot of cell phone ports of games. And maybe difficulties with that are why the Zeebo port never manifested. For some reason there are plumes of fire coming out of this green lake. The game in this level usually tries to maintain a consistent aesthetic with its hazards, so I'm not sure what the plumes of fire are about, especially when we get into the actual theme of the level later. We have a new enemy type apparently called the Crocodile Dummy, and it suggests we shoot at them from long range with freezing laser ammo, which we don't have, so we're just going to jump over them. In case you're wondering what's in that area that says keep out, it just takes us back to the last bonus area we were in, and when we exit it, we'll be all the way back there, so we don't want to go in there. You know, Sid the Dummy might have been right at home on the Zeebo. The Zeebo is basically just a proto-Ouya, except it has more of a purpose, because the Zeebo was made for developing countries that couldn't necessarily afford the big 3. And like most consoles that attempt to use cell phone hardware to play games on your TV, it didn't go so well. But with how few games it had and how little of them were exclusives, I would have liked Sid the Dummy to be an exclusive. That just seems like its place to me, like that's where it should have gone. But that would be at direct odds with what the developers seem to want for this game. This bit right here is kind of cool because it's a chopped up tree. And we want to be on the top layer, but we can see after I drop down here there are a couple more. And I'm not sure why the game gives you the option to explore those other layers because there's nothing on them. But you can if you want. Maybe they're just there for when you fall down to make your ascent more interesting. Anyway, the developers seemed to have high expectations for this game based on its release on 4 separate platforms, and the fact that there was a party game in the works based on it. Yeah, there was an unreleased party game in development called Party Crashers, which would have been exclusive to the Wii, and according to the description, it would be a party game that takes place in the Sid the Dummy universe. That tells me the wording and, well, the theme of the game that they were working on tells me they were trying to make a franchise out of Sid the Dummy, which seems bizarre. Anyway, you might have noticed that things are getting a bit more industrial in this swamp area. And indeed, when we hop down here, we can see some buzzsaws. It's possible to run into those if we fall into the water and then make no effort to move, but otherwise very easy to avoid. That was an extra life we just grabbed. And down here, underneath this platform, is yet another extra life. To my knowledge, the only way to make it in here and to the end of the hallway is to jump constantly like this, because otherwise the current moves faster than you can run. So yeah, we started out in a nature-y area, a little bit of an odd nature-y area, and then we came across a chopped up tree, and now things are getting a lot more industrial. Just want to make you aware of the level progression. Because they were trying to go for something here, and it's a shame that there isn't more dialogue or something to make the darkened atmosphere more worth it. Anyway, it's time to swim again. This world is actually, when I played this game for the first time, what gave me more hope again, because they were hinting at something at the beginning of the level, and then, well, the dark atmosphere started to have more of a purpose, with, like, industrializing this woodland area. And then I thought, oh man, maybe it is messed up foreign children's media after all. But you really shouldn't get too excited, because aside from some more nice aesthetics, like the ones present in this level, which don't actually look pretty but serve a purpose, there isn't much more here. Look, eventually Sid will grab that ladder, it's only a matter of time. There we go. And then I immediately jump off it to grab that health. But hey, I didn't want to lose a life. So this game got a remake. You can find it right now on Steam. It's just called Crash Dummy. And I don't know how finished it is. It's still in early access. It has been for over a year now. And to their credit, from the trailer, it looks a lot more polished than this, but they also did away with the dark atmosphere. And I would also urge you... Oh, hey, it's a mini-boss. This is Mr. Madness from the opening cutscene. And now Mr. Madness is defeated. Anyway, I would also urge you, if you're interested in the remake, not to look it up too heavily, because the intro of the remake spoils the plot twist in this game. And the plot twist in this game is kind of important. It's like one of the biggest reasons to play the damn thing. Down here is another area where we need to use our head literally to break through a wall. You may think this mechanic is devoid of design so far, and you'd be correct, but later in the game there is a brief attempt to fix that. Thankfully for us, it is only brief, because we do have to use the super run by waggling, and it's not a very good waggle. This here is a goods to last tight section. You just need to look at the shadows on the floor to figure out where they'll fall at, and you can even use them as platforms if you really want to. But it's over now, and that was rather fast. You know, another reason this should have been on the Zeebo is that the Zeebo had motion controllers. For some reason they were shaped like boomerangs, which I don't entirely understand, but I'm sure they would have worked for what this game does. Right now we're traversing the remnants of what appeared to be some kind of society before this place was industrialized, maybe recently. Oh, before any of you weirdos get the idea to go out and buy a Zeebo, please don't. Because although you could still probably find some for sale on eBay or something, the Zeebo is now a brick. For some reason, after the storefront went down, they bricked the console. It just doesn't work anymore. There's a startup screen that warns you it's not supported, and then you can't play it at all. So even though they gave you the option to store the games on the flash drive that came with the console or your own SD card, you couldn't actually play them after the storefront went down, which means there were only 2 years where you could have played your Zeebo before it just stopped working. Here's another extra life.
Did you see that?
I do like the way that one's hidden. So yeah, the Zeebo just doesn't work anymore, and that's kind of frustrating as someone who likes to preserve games that don't get a lot of exposure, because it's impossible to preserve the exclusives on the Zeebo anymore. I mean, of course there are emulators that play cell phone games, but there aren't any Zeebo emulators. Right now we're in some kind of swamp temple, and I like the idea that the folks industrializing this place just kind of desecrated the hell out of this temple. Seemingly with no visible negative consequences, unlike the usual. So we can assume that the people who lived here previously might have used this temple regularly, since it's so close to the village and all that. It is things like this that make me think the game was actually trying to be depressing and moody. And, well, that and the plot twist in some of the later cutscenes, but in spite of all that, I'm still not entirely sure whether it was meant to come across as this depressing. I mean, if they managed to create this atmosphere by accident, that's rather remarkable. Because regardless of the game's overall quality, there is a rather thick atmosphere of hopelessness. But all this does right now is make me want to go play something like the Core Gang. That's Core with a K, by the way, not a C. We needed to destroy those enemies to open this gate, and now we'll get to see some more buzzsaws, but actually as more prominent hazards this time. For what it's worth, you do have to move rather fast right here, but that really just amounts to holding down right on the control stick. And then there are some buzzsaws coming up out of the floor, which, as with the plants, it's best to jump before we move. And some rolling logs, which really test your reaction time assuming you run forward the whole time. It's best just to wait till they appear on screen and then start moving forward again. The way the game design here works does benefit a 2D platformer more than a 3D platformer, so it's not hard to see why the remake is in 2D. And right now it may be hard to see why the original game is in 3D, but there are reasons. We are getting near the end of the stage now, for those of you who have fallen asleep 3 or 4 times. It's not like I can blame you or anything. At least these next few hazards make reasonably good use of the 3D, like we have to move into the foreground to dodge these buzzsaws. Really isn't that much different than walking down a hole, but it does make use of 3D. And this is another group of enemies we actually have to destroy to proceed. I accidentally used a super run a couple of times here while I was trying to activate our super attack. The super attack does take a small amount of time to use, and here's another area which makes use of 3D. We have to bounce diagonally in order to get this extra life. This is also where we learn there are 2 kinds of spikes. There are those that go up and down automatically, and there are those that go up and down right as they see us. We're gonna jump over the ladder right now. And I believe, yeah, these are the final jumps in the level. The ones that are the most difficult as well because of the strange jump arc. And they too make some minimal but still notable use of the 3rd dimension, so there is a reason this game is in 3D. Oh well. You know, I actually died right here the first time I played this level, and I had no idea it was right before the boss. That was depressing. It's time to give that wall run mechanic a workout, because we're going to be pressing a lot of buttons during this boss fight. A lot of buttons on walls. So, this boss currently only has 1 attack. He can breathe pink smog at us, which will hurt us. And we need to make our way from one side of the arena to the other to press alternating buttons that cause logs to swing into his head. The challenge here is, of course, to avoid his breath while also avoiding the logs that are moving back and forth across the arena, which is not as difficult as it sounds. It is better to get hit by his breath than these logs, though, because the logs can potentially knock you into the green goop, which will kill you instantly and end the entire boss fight. This boss is not only more difficult, but also more fun than the first boss fight, which mostly involved a lot of waiting. It still takes a very long time, which can probably get on some people's nerves. His health is half down now, which means he enters the 2nd phase, where in addition to breathing at us, he will jump up and down and create a shockwave. The shockwave is invisible, so we need to use audio cues to know when we should be avoiding it. The audio cues are thankfully very loud and very obvious, and we only need to jump to avoid the shockwave. Avoiding the shockwave is actually easier than avoiding his breath. Of course, you can use visual cues if he's still on screen, but he's not going to be on screen for the entirety of the boss fight, so audio cues are preferable. Not a bad boss fight. It can be a little frustrating if you stick too close to the center of the arena and get knocked in the green goop. Especially since it's kind of long and you have to repeat all of it each time you fail. But after you get it down, it's like riding a bike, really.